Welcome to Pixel Pizza,
Did she say pizza?
your ultimate source for chiptunes, video game talk, and pepperoni. Delivered to you from Los Angeles and into the digital cyberspace of the 2020s.
Pizza power!
That's right, when super giant pizza.
I want a large, thick crust with double cheese, ham, pepperoni. Hey, where's my pizza? Pizza time.
Welcome, listeners, to another exciting episode of our podcast, Pixel Pizza. This week, we have started off with a song from our chiptune artist of the week, Noizzica, and the track that you just heard is called My Little One. And now we are moving on to the interview segment of our show, and I have another very exciting guest I am speaking with. She has done a number of award-winning projects, and she is currently working with Sweet Baby Inc. on a number of exciting new ones. This is Paula Rogers. How are you doing, Paula?
Hello, hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I like to start my show with the question, when in your life did you know you wanted to work in games?
Oh, that's a good question because for me, it came very late. It wasn't really until I was working in games that
Oh,
I
wow.
was like, this is pretty great. Because I had started working on NeoCab, I guess around 2017. And I loved that whole world. I loved the people I was meeting. I loved the creative thinking that entails like narrative branching and interactive storytelling. Um, yeah, so I kind of just I came to it at the end of, or I guess I came to it late, relatively late.
I never would have guessed. I mean, I've only admittedly played a little of it, but the writing is just so, it feels so natural to like what I would expect in a game in a good way.
Oh, okay. I'm glad to hear that.
So
Yeah,
how
I
did
was.
you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was pleased to see that a lot of the, other writing I had done in other mediums like in fiction and radio and TV and film, like those principles, the storytelling principles still carry over into games.
Absolutely. So how did you sort of fall into it then?
So I was in grad school here in Austin, Texas, where I live at UT, um, getting my MFA in screenwriting. And my dear friend Vincent Perea, who was the art director on NeoCab, reached out to me about the project, put me in touch with the creative director, Patrick, and it just kind of went from there. So it was a referral from a friend.
Oh, that's awesome. As far as screenwriting, were you doing any films or like student TV shows or anything?
So I had worked on a show at a studio here in Austin called Rooster Teeth. It was
Oh,
like
sure.
yeah, it's like kind of a late night style comedy show called What Do You Know? Which was a really weird concept, but fit really well into all the work I had done in my life so far, where they would take like a topic every night, every show is a different topic, and we would just do like a deep dive on that topic through like skits and trivia, and there would be some comedians as the panel to like kind of riff on this topic. So I was a writer's assistant on that, and then I ended up writing the episode about ghosts and spirituality because that's right up my alley. And I got to write some of my little comedy bits and stuff. So I had done that, and then I had some screenplays that were in some festivals at that time. Yeah.
That's awesome. Would you say comedy was something that, was always like a strong sensibility of yours or?
No, no. It's I find it a lot harder than dramatic writing. That show was the first like in earnest, this is comedy. We are trying to get laughs. And it
Mhm.
was like a jokey, joke forward type comedy, I'd say. Because that was kind of the shtick of the host, and it was like so like sketch driven and late night style. Um, but it was cool because there's something so vulnerable about writing comedy because you either get the laugh or you don't. With drama, you can tell yourself as a writer, like, well, people, it's resonating with them on a deep level through their silence. So with this show, it was filmed in front of a live audience. So I could tell immediately if a joke landed or not. And that was terrifying, but also really thrilling. And comedy is so much about timing and subtlety, and so it's a good skill to have, but I definitely find it more vulnerable and nerve-wracking.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've done stand up before, and I know
Oh yeah.
when you're on the stage and you're delivering the joke and that moment of before the laugh, is there gonna be a laugh? There's so much trepidation.
Yeah, exactly then. I don't think I could ever do that. Like just having someone else read my material and being like lurking in the shadows behind the audience was enough for me.
For sure. So, yeah, then what was your process like with NeoCab?
Uh, so that was a really unique game. So as the lead writer and story editor, I was in charge of all the usual stuff like story Bible, overall narrative, aligning the systems and the game design with the narrative, making sure everything like thematically was coherent. But also with NeoCab, it was so much content because we had, something like 20 characters besides our protagonist that you could meet at various points throughout the game in different installments multiple times. So it exponentially grows into, I think, 20 roughly times 3, 60 little segments of story, which is a lot to manage in between the like kind of interstitial, but not really, because that's the A story, the kind of bigger moments of the story where we're telling the overarching, like what Lena's really looking for, what she's doing in Los Ojos, what's going on with Savvy and Capra, that story. So weaving all those elements together was quite an undertaking. There's a lot of words in that game. It's about the length of like 2 contemporary novels. So there was a lot to keep track of in my brain. I felt like Lena really became a person that lived in my head during that time. And the other challenge with the game was that it was a single protagonist, first person character driven game, which is, I think, unusual in an interactive storytelling because of the inherent challenges of that. But then also we had a rotating team of writers, throughout the like 3-ish years we were working on the project. We had, maybe like 9 or so writers kind of coming in and out, who were all remote, who were all just working part-time on pieces of the game. So it was really up to me to kind of stitch all of this together for consistency and as best as I could really try to get the writers to align on the voices of the characters that they would all be working on together, even though they were never in the same room together. So everyone was writing Lena, but I had to make it sound like one person had written her. She was consistent. And then some characters were created and written solely by one writer, but they might also have a character that's written by multiple writers because you see this character multiple times throughout the game. So it was a lot of just like really strict editorial guidance that I had to give the writers as well.
Yeah, I know. Doing a writer's room in person is tough, and remotely, I can imagine it's even harder to communicate all that.
It was challenging, but it was a lot of fun. I had the good fortune of working with some incredible people, some really kind, generous, and like very creative, interesting people. So I really loved working on it, and I loved all the ideas that people were bringing to the table. And I think that's one of the strengths of NeoCab and why we structured it that way, because we wanted a diversity of voices and perspectives. Because in the game, you're in this city, Los Ojos, which is supposed to be this huge, like futuristic mega city. So it has to feel like a lot of different people are getting into your cab authentically, and that can only come from a diverse writer's room. So that was really important to us, and I think it was successful in that regard.
Yeah, and I think that ties into another question I wanted to ask, which is, usually you mentioned there are like 20 characters, and I would say usually in a video game, there may be like 8 or 9 characters with developed personalities, and the rest are NPCs. So how do you make sure that you have this wide array of characters that are also distinct?
That's a great question. So we really did a spreadsheet of the characters. When I started on the game, we were thinking that there were going to be 100 characters and you would only get to see them once. So it was very much more like a traditional kind of like open world NPC, like you're mentioning, type of interaction. But we realized that scope was out of control because the art was so beautiful and Vincent did such an incredible job with the detail and the humanity that's expressed in these characters, that to create that much original character art and character design with the subtleties of the animations that we needed, because so much of the game is about reading your passengers' emotions. So their facial expressions are actually part of the game in a lot of ways, or part of the system of the game that you have to monitor. So the detail of the art and animation that we needed would not support that many other characters. So we had to limit it, but we like in a lot of game development, we had to realized this midway through, and we had already made, I think, like 10 or 15 maybe. So it was a lot like Battlestar Galactica, where it was like, who are the final Cylons going to be? Who are our final characters going to be? What kind of demographics have we covered already? What storylines have we covered already? And then knowing now we only really have the production space for like 10 more characters at this point, what stories do we really want to tell? And can we shift any of the existing stories? Can't shift the art. Can we rewrite any of these characters to have more like diversity and cover more breadth in the stories and the sense of the city that we're trying to capture with them? So we really just, at that point, we really kind of just looked at the numbers of like, okay, we have so many characters of this gender, this race, this character is thematically talking about, religion. This character is thematically talking about love. And so we just listed like 20 themes that we wanted to explore in the future and just pegged those to a character.
Yeah, that's a really smart way of looking at it, for sure.
Thanks.
Were there any themes that really resonated with you in particular?
So I always go back to the very first character that I created from scratch for the game, who is Fiona. She is a character who is wearing a digital filter. We called it an animesh, and the idea is that it's kind of like nanotechnology makeup that you can program to be like a Snapchat filter in real life. And she's meeting someone on a date in person for the first time, that she's had a long online relationship with this guy, and she's very nervous, and you have to kind of talk. Your very first ride with her is about, she asks you about the filter, and we wanted it to be like a lot, like not quite the level of like she has a rabbit face, but like something where it's like you can't really, her real features are pretty heavily masked. And so do you tell her like, what, you should not wear the filter, you should like go forward with your natural beauty, or do you let her, or tell her that the filter is cool? Do you not care? And she's very vulnerable when she gets into your cab. So that ride is really personal to me, because Vincent and I worked really closely together on the design of Fiona, and the kind of cultural references, especially to Asian culture, and how femininity is represented in American and in Korean culture. If we put into the design of the character are themes that I'm really interested in, that are personal to me, and then also just like dating culture in general, and romantic comedies are just like a genre that I love. So being able to talk about how technology is making dating more terrible is something I will always be willing to talk about.
Oh, yes, I can absolutely relate. I was going to get to it later, but I was reading through your webcomic, Blind Data, and I do online dating, which is what it's about for listeners, and it's such an emotionally harrowing experience, and I feel like you put it into words so well.
Thank you. I'm really happy to hear that. And I also am like, I'm so sorry that we've all been through this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so sorry that like everyone keeps being like, it's very painful. Like it is. And that was like my point in making the comic, is like, I had never, I still to this day don't know of something that everyone is using and also hates so much
Right.
and finds so deeply painful, emotionally painful. Um, Maybe Twitter, but
Yeah,
it's like
probably.
it's not the same stakes even, Um, and so I just yeah, the whole point of the comic is to kind of push back against this idea of like, well, this is online dating is just how it is, and it's the best way to go about things, and we're all just data now, and so it doesn't matter if our feelings get hurt, or it shouldn't have an emotional cost to go on these dates because it's efficient, and we should just let the apps do this, and it's fine because I don't think it is.
Yeah, no, there's so many unspoken things and so many situations you can't account for just by looking at it. So it was very cathartic to read.
I'm glad. There will be more. I just have the first three released to try and kind of build an audience. There are 9 stories in total. Um, and so I'll be releasing them over the next few weeks. And just quickly too, I want to like give a summary of the premise for your listeners too. It's called Blind Data. But it's not, and it's about online dating, but it's not about like the horror stories of online dating that like we've all heard, we've all had those kinds of like terrible, terrible nightmare situations. It's really about the fact that, I had at this point in my life, I've been doing online dating, or I had been, I'm kind of quit at this point, but
Mm.
I've been doing it for like 10 years, almost over 10 years. And there were dates I had been on, some of them 10 years ago, one single date where I spent 3 hours with somebody in a coffee shop. And yet I spent, didn't come to anything, wasn't bad, wasn't good, it just was. And I still think about it 10 years later. And I just want to talk, and I don't know why. And some of them I really don't know why. And so I just wanted to start writing these down as a way of saying, like, even these little throwaway dates, just a date, it doesn't matter, but it really does. It makes a mark. And I am a very sensitive person, and I'm used to things affecting me more deeply than others. But I
Mm.
wanted to see if other people felt this way too, that even like a simple first date can really have meaning or impact in your life.
Totally. Yeah, I can relate to that. It feels like, yeah, most of them are just, you know, just okay. Like, I don't know. You again, you put it into words better than I do. But it's
Well, thank you for reading it. I appreciate that.
absolutely. Uh, so yeah, I guess going back to some of your other work, you, I saw that you were a professor of interactive storytelling at the University of Texas in Austin.
Yes.
Tell me about that. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, it was great. So for a year, I was a full-time professor on the faculty at UT Austin, for the Arts, Entertainment, Technology department in the School of Design and Creative Technology. Unfortunately, that was the year of the pandemic, first year of the
Oh,
pandemic. So it was all online, which was very challenging. But I taught 2 semesters. I taught a total of 6 classes, covering a lot of different things, everything from just like intro to narrative design to storytelling structure that was very familiar and very similar to screenwriting structure. Like I taught 3 act structure. We watched movies and talked about just storytelling principles in general. We read short stories and parts of novels. And then I also taught classes where, I would assign them to make a 80s arcade style version of a movie that they liked. And like,
oh,
how
that's
do you
awesome.
translate like, a 2 hour plot of a narrative driven piece into something that's so simple. It's like a, 8-bit style game that's really based on mechanics more than narrative. How do you capture the essence of the narrative in that? It was a lot of fun. But ultimately I missed my own work. I loved my students so much. I met some incredible people, even through the computer, who
Mhm.
I was so deeply impressed by. But I missed writing. So I hope maybe someday to go back to teaching. Um,
What were some of the most clever projects that your students came up with?
so I had some students. I had an assignment where there was I made them do I forced them to create an escape room plan, um and like based on a narrative of their choosing, and I had a student create an escape room in a Starbucks with this post-apocalyptic world where they were like dinosaur Karens had been turned into dinosaurs, and they were like pressuring you to like make them frappuccinos to their very specific demands. It was really, really funny. I had students do a version of Back to the Future as an 8-bit game, and a version of Secret Garden as an 8-bit game, which I thought was really lovely. I also assigned a project of doing a narrative PowerPoint, and a student, her name is Vivian Lau. She did a PowerPoint about the myth of Oedipus and wait, I'm getting this wrong. The I have to look this up. I'm sorry.
Oedipus and Jocasta?
And Eurydice, is it
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Orpheus?
Orpheus, sure.
Orpheus and Eurydice.
Yeah.
Yes, she did a PowerPoint on the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice that truly made me cry. It was so beautiful, and it was a PowerPoint.
Wow. I've never heard a PowerPoint make anyone cry. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
I was very inspired. I mean, teaching is great, but it's also like it's its own separate profession, its own separate career.
totally. What would you say are like one or two key like like touch points or lessons or like phrases you would remind to your students?
Oh, I was always telling them the same thing over and over. And it's one of the things I realized. I had never taught writing so intensely, so full time. It's like kind of like what I was saying in the beginning, like even though you're in different mediums and you have to kind of adjust your approach to tailor it to your medium and to your audience, writing is writing and storytelling is storytelling. And so I was constantly saying things like, what does the character want? Your character has to have something that they want, that we're following throughout the story. And they also have, what does the character need? What do they need to learn in this story? What is their like character flaw? And then I was always talking about antagonists, because young writers, a lot of writers, especially young writers, myself included, my cat has joined me.
Um,
Young writers have trouble with antagonists because they're nice. They're nice people. And they either create antagonists, they typically create antagonists that like aren't as bad as they could or should be. Or they create an antagonist that's cartoonishly bad. So they're not actually that interesting or compelling. And an antagonist is really a dark mirror of the protagonist. And they should be compelling, and they should have an argument that makes sense if it were not so twisted. Like the Thanos is a perfect example of
oh,
this,
sure.
right? So like his methodology is quite bad, but you could kind of, if it wasn't so extreme, you could kind of see what he's trying to do, and you can kind of almost sympathize with what he's trying to do. So I was constantly talking about that. So those are my three writing gems. Character want, conflict, always have conflict. A scene has to have something that comes out of the one, and then the protagonist antagonist relationship.
Yeah, that's definitely those are things that always stick out when I'm experiencing a story. So you can have those gems for free, audience. Uh, and so then how did you come to be involved with Sweet Baby?
So Kim Belair, who's the co-CEO and founder of Sweet Baby, I met her through NeoCab. She was referred to us as a writer who had been at Ubisoft for a long time and had an incredibly impressive resume and list of games that she had worked on, and was looking to kind of strike out on her own. And so we hired her as a contractor on NeoCab, and working with her was just an absolute dream. We did so much good work together on characters and narrative design in the game, and we just worked really well together. And then around that time, she started her company, Sweet Baby. And when I left NeoCab, they had some projects kind of waiting for me, so I just jumped right in at that point.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's great that you guys gelled together so well.
I feel very fortunate. It's a wonderful company. I know you're going to talk to Kim next, and she can tell you much better than I can, like the structure of Sweet Baby and her philosophy for the company. But as a person who's working there, I can say like everything she says is true. Like it really does feel like a very supportive, creative environment, and I'm really very fortunate to be there.
That's awesome to hear. Were you involved in their project on the Playdate? Because that looked really interesting to me.
I was not, no. Those are really cool though.
Okay, well, I'll speak to Kim about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think now we should probably go to our musical break for the episode. This is about the halfway mark, I think. So this is from Noizzica once again. This track is called Illusions of a Better World. So listen to that, audience, and we will be right back with Paula. Welcome back to Pixel Pizza. You just listened to the track Illusions of a Better World by Noizzica. And now we are back with Paula of Sweet Baby. And I'd love if you could give me like kind of a broad overview for our audience about what kind of projects you've been up to while you're there.
Yeah, so um like I mentioned, I went into working for Sweet Baby like right after NeoCab launched in 2019. Um the one of the things about the games industry is that development cycles are really long. So
Mhm.
there's many projects that I've been working on for a few years that are either unannounced or have yet to actually ship, that are in the works. But I can speak, broadly to some of them. One project that I'm working on, outside of Sweet Baby, that I started before I joined the company, is with the artist and game developer Nicole He, and it's a project with the National Film Board of Canada. It'll be a browser-based game that we should be announcing pretty soon.
Mm.
That's been really a lot of fun, and I love working with Nicole. Um, and then on the Sweet Baby side, Sweet Baby, he works on a lot of projects. You'll hear from Kim. The ones that I've touched, we have been working on a game with Insomniac. That's been really fun, doing a lot of like world building,
They're one of
which
my
is
favorite
exciting.
studios.
Yeah, they're great.
So
They're
cool.
really, really great thinking there, and like the depth that they want from us is really gratifying and cool to work on. Um, I'm working on another game with Nicole, that'll be coming out from Nerial. Um, and then I did a little bit on Hyperlight Breaker, um, and mostly just like story consulting on that game. And then Goodbye Volcano High, I was a lead writer on that for 2 years, and that's a project that has been announced, obviously, and will be coming out soon. And I'm excited to see the project when it's completed.
Awesome. Uh, I guess follow-up question. Uh, would you say what are some of the challenges with it? Sounds like you've done a wide variety of projects. Have you felt like you've had to adjust your writing style at all to fit like different genres and such?
Yes, that's a great question. I definitely have. Another unannounced game I worked on with Sweet Baby was about very broadly kind of like time jumping in aliens, tactical combat kind of stuff.
Oh wow.
And that's not it's not the kind of game that I am super familiar with. And so doing the like world building and thinking for that, I mean, I love science fiction, um, but adjusting to, that genre and what those players really want and what's fun for those players was new to me. Um, yeah, so that has been something, there are so many different types of games out there, that you do have to have a pretty diverse style. I think like I've written a couple of games that are geared to younger audiences, like a little bit older than young adult, in from like book terms. So like late teens, early 20s. And so I've had to write as teenagers actually, or as Gen Z a
Mm.
lot. And I'm not. So
Um,
I've had to like that was a challenge to kind of try and be cool.
right. You have to do your research on TikTok.
Yes, I do. It's grueling. I'm
I can
hours
imagine.
on TikTok.
So are there any cases, I guess maybe with that sci-fi one, was it nonlinear storytelling?
It's still in development, so it kind of remains to be seen.
Sure.
TBD.
Awesome. Let's see. What else? What is something about your personal process that nobody knows?
Oh, um, I like to take a lot of naps. I get my work done, I meet my deadlines, everyone, but I do like to take a nap most most days.
That is a good question, meeting your deadlines. How do you schedule yourself as a writer?
Um, so as a freelancer, when I was like purely freelance and I was juggling a bunch of clients, and before I joined Sweet Baby full time, it's much more challenging because I'd be working with people in different time zones. Um, but that kind of chaos works for me. And so it actually feels like more freedom and more manageable in a way for me personally to be like, I'm gonna get my work done in the pockets of time between my life responsibilities when I can. So I know I have to meet this deadline by whatever date. I have 5 days to do it. In those 5 days, I also have to like go to the grocery store and go to my, kickboxing classes and see my friends. So if I'm doing some of those things during the day and then working at night, that's fine with me. I
Mhm.
prefer to have that flexibility. So I do have to kind of informally block off time in my schedule and be like, okay, this next 3 hours, this is what I'm doing. But for the most part, I kind of play it by ear as much as I can. But now that I'm Sweet Babies full time, we have a much more regimented schedule, regular schedule. So we have like our morning check-ins, and then we have a lot of meetings during the day. So it is much more of like a 9 to 5 type schedule, which is fine. I still get mine. I still get my naps.
That's good. That's good. Uh, what would you say some of your hopes are for like the next year or so for what you're doing?
Oh, well, I would love to see some of my projects be announced or be real live games out in the world. That would be really cool. And we mentioned the comic that I'm working on, Blind Data. Um, it's I'd like to finish that up. It probably should be finished by the end of the year, but we'll see. You never know what life will throw at you. But uh working on that, continuing, the projects that I'm working on for Sweet Baby are pretty uh, intensive projects, and I think I'm gonna be involved in these developments for like the next couple of years. So my time is pretty locked down, but it's very fulfilling. So I kind of just want to keep on doing this.
That's great. It sounds like you're really happy with what you're doing, and that's super important.
I am, yeah. I love visiting Montreal. It's where Sweet Baby is based, so I guess the goal would be spending more time up there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Austin, I've always heard it's such a great town. What's the game development scene like there?
I don't know. I just sit in my little room in my house and I work for companies in Canada. I don't know
Oh,
why. So I don't know too many people in the game dev scene here, but I know that there is one. Um, I don't know, it just worked out that way. I do like Austin though. I do have like wonderful friends here. My family is in Texas. Uh, it's so hot. I know it's like,
yeah. Oh, I'm in LA. It's
yeah,
been so hot lately. But it's on my list and like my top 5 places in the States I want to visit.
it's worth it. Yeah, it's worth checking out for sure.
So another thing that I noticed you mentioned previously is that you have an affinity for ghost stories. Uh, I was wondering, do you have one you could share with our audience?
Ooh, yeah. Uh, I love ghost stories. Um, so let's see. I will tell this one. So many years ago, maybe like 8 years ago, I was on a business trip to a town outside Philadelphia, and the agency is an ad agency that flew me out there at that time to like interview for a job. And they put me up in this hotel. I arrived really late, so they just kind of like picked me up, put me in the hotel, and like, see you in the morning. I went to sleep. I could see that like the hotel was kind of an older hotel, but it was really dark. I was tired. So I went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up and there was, it sounds wild, but there was a man in colonial garb
What?
standing at the foot of my bed watching me. And I don't know if you've ever seen a ghost, and I imagine they appear differently to different people. But it was like he wasn't like there, like fully there, like a person would be like in all embodied in full color. It's like kind of like half figure, kind of there, kind of not, but I could definitely see this figure. And in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, that's a ghost, of course. And I felt this overwhelming sense of just like, he's protecting me. He's watching this place. And I went back to sleep, which is so unlike me, like in every way. As much as I love ghost stories, I've always been very, very easy to frighten and very easily spooked by them. So went back to sleep, and the next morning I went to the agency and they're like, hey, how did you sleep last night? It's like, fine, weird question. And they're like, oh, because that hotel is one of the most haunted hotels in America. It was like dates back to the colonial era. It was like a resting stop for soldiers. And I was like, great, cool hotel choice. And so the following night, I didn't sleep at all. Like, even though my feeling with this spirit was like, he's protecting me, everything's fine, and I was not scared at all in the moment, it was too much for my little brain. And the next night I like left all the lights on and barely slept. I didn't see anything else.
Yeah, I can't think of any specific times that I have seen a ghost, to answer your question. I mean, I guess I've heard noises or things I haven't been able to quite explain, but no, I'm still waiting for that moment where I have a close encounter. So this is the Pixel Pizza podcast. Where is your favorite pizza place?
Ooh. I used to go to this place in Oakland when I lived in the Bay Area. It's called Boot and Shoe Service because it took over the building of a boot and shoe repair company called Boot and Shoe Service.
Wow.
And they kept the sign and the name. And it was just delicious pizza. I went there so much.
That sounds really good. There was a place in New York where I'm from, called Two Boots Pizza, and that was excellent. So maybe there's something there.
Yeah, there's something there.
Footwear related
Footwear
pizza shops.
pizza. It's a secret that you only learn here.
That's right. Pizza shop aspiring owners looking for a name, something. Yeah, so that was all the questions I had lined up. Was there anything you wish that I'd asked?
No, I mean, this was a wonderful interview. Your questions were really thoughtful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking with you.
Likewise. So, yeah, I guess in that case, where can people keep track of your work when it is announced?
So, sweetbabyinc.com or following Sweet Baby on Twitter. All my projects through them will be announced there. I'm also on Twitter at Paula_bot, BOT. I'm not on Twitter very much. It's much easier to find me on Instagram, depending on your tolerance for pictures of cats and dogs. And my website is paulacreative.com, and my comic Blind Data, you can find that at blinddatacomic.com.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to have all those links in the description, audience. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Pixel Pizza. And we will see you next week. And I think next week we will be having our Sweet Baby Part 2. This is a two-parter. So very exciting. And
That'll be a good one. Definitely stay tuned.
yes, for sure. So we're going to end off with our final track from Noizzica, our chiptune track, and it is called Moments of Mild Daydreaming. I really like the titles that Noizzica has created for their songs. Yeah. Anyway, bye. Bye-bye, Pixel Pizza. Okay.
Yay, that was so much fun. Thank you.